This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. Easy is your answer. I'm as crazy for the love of you. It won't be a stylish marriage. I can't afford a carriage, but you don't sleep top on the seat of a bicycle bill for two.
This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. That voice you just heard is an Alien Group VoiceBox 2 connected to an Atari 800. VoiceBox was an external speech synthesizer box for the Atari 400 and 800. VoiceBox and its successor, VoiceBox 2, was marketed by the Alien Group starting in July 1982. The device used the Votrax SC-01A speech synthesizer chip to add speech and singing to the Atari. Versions were also available for the Commodore 64 and Apple II computers. The Alien Group was actually an offshoot of Electro-Harmonix. Electro-Harmonix was founded by rhythm and blues keyboard player Mike Matthews in 1968. The company is still in business today and is well regarded for its guitar pedals and other musicians' gear. For more information on the Alien Group and VoiceBox, I recommend reading Bill Lange's blog post called Atari Says Its First Word. There's a link to that in the show notes at ataripodcast.com. This interview with Mike Matthews took place on November 13th, 2017. I know that you started Electro-Harmonix like in, 1968 or something? But
Correct.
But then you created the Alien, this weird company with the name the Alien Group in July 82 or so. So why was it a different company, and why? What was that idea?
Well, it wasn't a formal company we formed. What happened is Electro-Harmonix, I've always been into business ever since I was 5 years old.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I mean, I got my master's in business. I played in a rock and roll band. It was a really great band. I was a really good player. I played keyboards at Cornell in the early '60s. I promoted a lot of rock and roll shows, and anyway, I got involved with the making sound effects pedals. With $1,000, and I was in a hurry, and we were growing super fast. I mean, with that $1,000 and no outside investment, I built it up to doing $5 million a year, and I was always pushing the company ahead for more sales. I wanted to double sales. I wanted to whip death in my own lifetime, and whenever I ran into problems, I solved them. Except, in the early 80s, I had too many problems all at once, and I collapsed, and I went bankrupt. Mm-hmm. So when I went bankrupt, it was very painful and whatever, and I thought that maybe I should try something different than sound effects. So the speech synthesizers was one of the things we did with Votrax chips, I dabbled with some other stuff. I only got back into Electro-Harmonix pedals back in the early 90s. At that time, I was starting to do business with Russia, and started selling vacuum tubes that were made in Russia, because it's still a niche business for guitar amps and high-end hi-fi. And, vacuum tubes, just everybody stopped making them. They're only made now by 3 companies in the whole world. But in the early 90s, I noticed, very early 90s, like 1990, that all of the pedals that I made in the 70s was selling, and I made large quantities. I made hundreds of thousands of pedals, and these pedals were selling for much more than what they used to sell for. This new vintage market developed. Mm-hmm. So Russia collapsed in the early 90s with the glasnost and perestroika, when the Soviet Union collapsed. And all their factories over there, most all of them were military factories. So I hooked up with a small military factory in St. Petersburg that made test equipment, electronic test equipment. It was a very small factory. I just gave them the circuit diagram, and they just relayed out the PC board, redesigned the chassis and the foot switch, and I got back into the pedals. And now we're booming again. I'm much more conservative, and our sales are growing to where we're doing, over 30 million a year. But I have loads of cash in the bank because I don't like the old days. I'm so aggressive. I'm more patient. But anyway, the Alien Group was a pause where I was trying to do something other than musical sound effects, and we did one for the Commodore and also for the Apple.
Yeah, I saw that in the ads. You said it was available for the Atari, the Commodore, and the Apple. It looked like they were. Well, first of all, were the voice boxes made in Russia, or was that something that was?
No. Those was in the early '80s, and those were all made in New York.
Okay.
And they were all with Votrax chips. And at that time, something else that was kind of really popular was SAM, S-A-M. I forget what.
Software automatic mouth, right?
Yeah, that was popular. But the Votrax chips, I forget what, but we were able to do other things with the Votrax chips that you couldn't do with the SAM.
Right. It had some advantages, like it didn't, on the Atari, the screen didn't blank when you talked, and it had a arguably
I just
voice.
don't know. I don't even know if I ever got a SAM and played with it.
Did you said you tried some other things with the Votrax chips? Do you remember other products that you thought about?
No. Just those products.
Okay. Yeah, there was. I found one article that it said that you were considering other interesting products, but it was really vague about what.
No. I did another computer product, something called a scroller.
Scroller.
Yeah, where you could. It was really a tool for software developers, where they could on one screen scroll through a software. Nothing existed at that time. This is again in the early '80s, and it was not a successful product.
Huh. Do you remember how the voice box sold? Was it a moderate seller?
I don't remember, but they sold nicely. But different things happened. Like Commodore went bankrupt. They for a while they were the biggest. They went bankrupt. Atari. I
sold
just don't
to
remember.
one. Yeah, Atari was sold to one company, then another company, and things were not going well for them either.
And I don't remember what happened with Apple. For Apple, I think we had a more complex model that had more stuff inside the box, but I just don't remember.
Okay.
But my son Scott, who I asked, he wrote when he was 13, wrote some software thing. I asked him if he would talk to you, but he said he didn't remember much either. But you could mail him. Okay. Email him. He might remember some things. There's something that he wrote when he was 13 for Atari voice boxes.
All right, I'm going to get into stuff that, again, you might not remember, and don't feel bad if you don't. There were two versions of the voice box, version 1 and 2. Do you remember what was different? I think it was only the software was different and the hardware was different.
I don't even remember that we had two versions.
Okay. There was a contest with a $5,000 prize for the best software made to use the hardware. Was there a winner?
I just don't remember.
Sure. Okay. So the logo is the same. That you're still using the voice box logo was like a head with a big curly head of hair. Maybe it's your head, and it.
No. Yeah. What happened when I first went into business with Electro-Harmonix in 1968, and I got my very first loft. The first guy I hired was a technician. And that and he lived in the East Village. And remember, those were that was the boom of the hippie ages.
Sure.
He lived in the East Village Greenwich Village, and there were a lot of hippie artists there, and he brought a few of them up to my loft, and they painted all my walls in these different day-glow art. Some great Jimi Hendrix, who happened to used to be a personal friend of mine, and the great Hendrix. And another gal did these different faces, and then I got from her that black face. And I just used that as an eye catcher when I advertised my first Electro-Harmonix product, and it just became associated with the company, and I still use that.
Nice.
And some people called it the ram's head. Some people said it's me. Some people call it a lion. But it was just it was just some art that was eye catching, and I liked.
Nice. Cool. Do you remember if the Atari, the Commodore, and the Apple version which was the best seller?
No, I just don't remember.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
I get it.
But I'm pretty sure the Atari was first.
And you had that neat software with the head. It would actually put a face on the screen that would lip sync when it talked, and that was pretty unique.
Oh, I don't even remember that.
Yeah. Well, there's Sam, the one we talked about before, that it just screen went blank, but with your thing, it actually put a head on the screen, and its lips would move as it talked, and it was pretty
well,
cool.
Well, the person that actually designed that product was a guy named David Cockerell. He wouldn't be available for any interview, but David Cockerell is one of the world's leading, most famous and best designers of electronic music, hardware and software. He's an English guy, and he actually designed the product.
Nice. At your behest, was it his idea or your idea?
I don't remember whose idea. It was probably something we were kicking around, and like I always decided on where I should invest money to develop, and I would guess that the general idea was mine, and then once I said, "Hey, design this," then he probably implemented features that he came up with.
Sure.
Like this talking face, for example.
And were these like hand assembled, or did you have was this part of your factory?
Well, it was very simple. The number of components was very simple. Mm-hmm. So, the components were hand assembled into printed circuit boards, but there weren't too many of them, and we had wave solder machine, and we soldered them. Why did we stop? I guess, because Commodore went bankrupt, the Atari kept changing, and I forget what happened with Apple. And maybe I got discouraged. Remember, this is early. Apple was coming on strong after Commodore and Atari, and so maybe with Apple, with Atari and Commodore dropping from the scene, I just got involved with some other stuff that I did at that time. I didn't think that I figured that the same demise would happen to Apple.
Sure.
Which of course didn't.
I'm sure that the pedals and music things were probably selling pretty well, and this might have been a distraction from that.
This was in the early '80s, and when I was trying to get away from get into something new from pedals, but I got more involved with Russia because I went to Russia in 1979, and in those days, of course, there was the Cold War, and but I was still doing business with countries like Hungary, with the government of Hungary, with a lot of people in Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia. But I got an invitation to exhibit at the first trade show open to Western companies in Russia. And I said, this is the heart of communism, and this is much bigger. I got to go there. And usually to a trade show, I would just bring one guitar player. But I got carried away and brought a whole rock and roll band, all my favorite players.
Uh-huh.
And It's on our website. If you look on our website, ehx.com, www.ehx.com,
Uh-huh.
and you'll find the story. Electro-Harmonix goes to Russia.
Yeah, I see that here. Uh-huh.
And it was a long show. It was a 10-day show, and these favorite players like of mine, only some of them played together, and some of them were totally new. But by the second day, we had such a fucking great drummer. His name was Cookie from Ithaca, New York. So soulful that the whole band was really cooking, and the band itself would go on 3 times a day. Actually, this was a big trade show in Sokolniki Park in Moscow, and our building only had companies from the USA, Japan, and Germany, and other countries like India had its own building, and Colombia had its own building, and other countries had other buildings. But when the band went on, everybody throughout the whole fairgrounds would hear it, and they would jam into the place. You could see on those pictures, packed to hear these crazy Americans,
Uh-huh.
all these Russian organizations wanted to buy our stuff, but they had no money. So that's what got me thinking, well, if they had no money, what does Russia make that I can buy? Because they need hard currency. And so I got involved with primitive integrated circuits. In those days, these cheap integrated circuits were called jelly beans, and they would usually sell for 15 cents or 25 cents a piece. But what happened every 2 or 3 years, when new series of integrated circuits became popular, the companies that made these jelly beans stopped making them, and so then they became like very hard to get. The cost would go up to $1, $2. Sometimes you couldn't get them.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that if Russia made integrated circuits, these primitive integrated circuits, if I had a source for that when this cycle hit again, because I went through it as a manufacturer a couple of times, I could supply these Russian integrated circuits, and so that I got involved with selling those. But then when I visited the Ministry of Electronics in Russia in 1988, where I saw hanging on the wall all these vacuum tubes, I said, "Geez, vacuum tubes! Those are used in guitar amps."
Yeah.
I switched into that. And it was much easier for me to sell because everybody in the music industry knew me. And for many years, vacuum tubes became the biggest part of my business until Electro-Harmonix pedals overtook it about 3 years ago. And now the pedals we're really known throughout the world by anybody that plays electric guitar is the most creative, innovative company in designing sound effects. We have competitors, but nobody comes up with as many new things as we do. So,
well,
anyway,
congratulations.
Well, whatever. That's I'm 75. I'll be 76 in a couple of weeks. So I've been around. So I got a lot of stories.
Nice. So last question. If you could send a message to the Atari computer users who used your products and who are listening to this interview now, what would you tell them?
I'd tell them rock and roll.
All right.
And enjoy your Atari. And it was a great computer in its day, and I hope you're still digging it.
Cool. Thank you so much, Mike.
Okay, thanks a lot. Sorry I couldn't give you more specifics.
It's okay. I'm thrilled. This is great.
Bye-bye.
Bye. One more thing. I talked to Scott Matthews, Mike's son. He told me in an email, "My first big software project was for my dad when I was about 13. What I wrote was an Atari BASIC function that would take a number as input and would output the phonetic equivalent of that number. The idea was that other people, who wanted to write applications that would speak a number, could use the function to convert application-generated numbers to a speakable string. Scott also doesn't remember who, if anyone, won the $5,000 contest for Best Talking Software. If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute, there are two ways you can help. You can help fund these interviews directly by contributing to my Patreon. A small monthly contribution will help offset the expenses of making these oral history interviews. Contribute at patreon.com/savitz. Or make a tax-deductible contribution to the Internet Archive, a nonprofit digital library that has done incredible things to preserve computer history. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate. Thanks.